Hey everybody, it's Dredile here, back with an interesting video today, and I'm kind of ripping off ModDB's steez here with the title of this video, Development Banter, simply being that they haven't released a development banter in about 9 or 10 years, and I know of a particular copyright law that actually is the life of the author plus 50 years. But I think we can take that rule, bend it a lot, and use the 9-year mark is a good baseline. Our guest, I guess, is Dolmo the Douglas. If you haven't heard of him, he's awesome, super witty guy. His voice is like an angel pouring honey in your ears, and he just overall has a really good eye for development. I figured he'd have some interesting stuff to talk about with me because we're both mapping nerds. So if you subscribe to my channel forever ago looking for that kind of content, sit back, pour yourself some coffee, lean back in your chair, and just listen to us have a beautiful conversation. Right off the cusp of his release, Cosmonaut. Awesome mod. That'll also be in the description. Dolmo the Douglas. How's it going, man?
Yeah, it's going well. It's been a busy past couple of days with, getting the mod ready.
Yeah, I bet, man. You must be stoked.
Mod DB. Yeah, it's a very different time to what I've been in for the past kind of year, because it's been a very quiet year, obviously, just making Cosmonaut, and then suddenly I release it and everyone's talking about it. I'm getting a lot of messages on Twitter and Discord complaining about the mod. And also thanking me and whatnot. So it's been kind of a good reception, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been hearing about it for a while, and it started out as a map challenge, right? A timed 30-day map challenge. I remember doing one of those mapping competitions, and I even found that pretty strenuous and intensive, just given the time limit and everything for it. So let alone getting it ready towards the end game where you're releasing the mod must have been pretty tough. Getting everything lined up. You must have been busy as a bee, man.
Yeah, I guess, at the start it was very different because it was, I think it was 60 days, or at least it was 2 months, because it was the Nostalgiaville challenge, which was a special mapping challenge, as in it wasn't part of the Lambda Cup or the Hammer Cup, so it was kind of a very intense couple of weeks.
Were you just glued to the computer from, like, I don't know, like 5 p.m. to midnight like I was? Or were you just somehow able to squeeze it in and make it work with like 2 hours a day or something because you're just a wizard?
Well, it depends, because obviously the philosophy I have basically when making maps is get as much of the map made as quick as possible. So incidentally, I had the first, I think, 3 or 4 days off, where, I didn't have to go to uni or anything like that. So I just sat down, locked myself in my room, and got as much of the first map done as possible. And then I found after I'd done that, I could kind of spend a bit less time. And then, obviously, once I'd finished the first map, I did the same with the second, where I got through a lot of it in a very short time, and then I could step back a bit. So that's kind of how all the maps go.
Right. And like when you're beginning like a project and everything, like when you're starting out a map, everyone has their own way of, pre-planning. Some people don't pre-plan, which is evil. But what's your process like for beginning a map, dude? Do you like do it with like pen and paper, or you just hop straight into Hammer and start laying out like dev blocking it, or like what's your strategy when you start out with a project?
It's kind of not always the same. Often I find I can go straight in and start placing blocks down, and then it's best to play as early as you can, so you can assess where you're at. Is this good? Does this work? Other times I have found myself writing stuff down. A few times I've tried to draw professional graphs, like real level designers do, but it's not a very common occurrence, at least not for me. So yeah, it's kind of a bit of both, but
so you just kind of have like an idea in the back of your head, like the end game. So I want a player to go from the starting point, which would just be he lands on a beach from a rocket, which is an amazing premise, and then the end point is he gets back into a space shuttle because he's like, freak this, I'm out, I'm done with this Combine scheme. And so you just kind of freestyle in between, or do you like you literally like pen paper like the hallways, or you just go straight into Hammer and do that, right?
Yeah, I have these kind of, I don't know how to put it, like keystone or these key points where I know it, I definitely want this, I definitely want that, and then I'll fill in the bits in between, as you say, and that's probably the most difficult thing, because you're like, oh, what shall I put here? Let's just put a random corridor. Oh, it's just a bland corridor. We need to do something with it. And then often I find myself, ramming a puzzle in, just like, there's a lot of that in Cosmonaut, I think, where instead of designing the puzzle first, I've designed an area first, and then try to put a puzzle in. And I think the prime example from Nostalgiaville Cosmonaut was the generator puzzle on the second map, where you're in a room and there's a generator that's for some reason only powering a lock to a door, which doesn't make any sense. And that the reason for it being so bad and not making much sense is because I had the room and I thought, well, I'll stick this generator here and the player can break the boards to make it fall through.
And I think that's like, is that like standard anxiety when you're a Half-Life modder, just because knowing that like every 10-30 seconds in Half-Life you have to either be breaking a wooden plank or shooting a head crab falling out of a ceiling strut, where you just pack things into the level just to give the players something to do, or
yeah, it's very difficult in that regard. I mean, a lot of the stuff's been done, and coming up with really new concepts for Half-Life 2 is a very tiring and long process.
Yes.
I don't think I've quite mastered yet, but
the things you have to do to master it, my friend.
Yeah.
The things you have to do.
I have to spend another year locked in my room trying to make it an even bigger mod.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, I'm pretty sure there's people out there who wouldn't be complaining. I would not be one of them. Lock yourself in your room, Dolmo. I'm advocating for social isolation in favor of more maps for me to play.
It's true. It has been a very lonely year, I have to say. You kind of have to, in many ways, give up a lot of stuff. Not like I would have much of a social life. What little social life I had.
Don't sell yourself short, Dolmo.
I find myself, it's now become even less. But it's all for this meaning of having this mod, which I'm very happy to have made, and I hope that obviously I know that people are enjoying it, and it was worth it, definitely.
Yeah, no, it was a really great replication of what made Half-Life 2 great to play. The gameplay mechanics were amazing, and everything like that. And I think one thing that you were just sort of mentioning that most people really don't understand when they ask me, like, hey man, how do I get into modding? And like, I really want to get into modding and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, if you really want to make a mod, like really make a mod and everything, like you're gonna be sitting down locked away for a while. Like, it's no joke, the development grind and everything, like it's intensive. And if you really want to get into modding, I mean, of course you can flirt with the concept and just make levels, which is great, but if you really want to make a product of value that people enjoy, you're going to be to some extent chained to your desk, from for hours a day. And it's just slow paced work, starting with one cube in a map that then you carve into hillsides and add gameplay elements and next thing you know, you're the sounds and the triggers, and once you have the viz elements in there, you lose track of everything, and it's just like
that's true.
You go mad. It's like going mad after a certain point.
Yeah, it's a slow spiral of descent into madness, but in many ways, I think this is a part where modding triumphs over just standard game design in the industry. And I'm not knocking game design in the industry, but if you're making a game, obviously you've got deadlines to meet, you've got a lot more work to do, a lot more pressure. But with modding, when I was making Cosmonaut, I didn't have a boss telling me what to do, or someone overlooking my progress. I could decide when I wanted to change something or adapt something or anything like that. And I find that's partially why modding is so appealing, and that's partially why I obviously do it is just because it's kind of like a kind of light version of games design. Because I didn't obviously need to make any of the assets. Well, at least the main assets, the character models. It's all there, and I can make something that a lot of people can enjoy.
Yeah, and like you said, that's
yes, it is.
Yeah, that's the end product is really what matters, right? Like the end result, it's worth it in the end. Sitting down and going through the process.
And it's also very strange because this obviously cosmonauts been in my mind for a long time, and then suddenly everyone else is talking about it and discussing it, and it becomes, it's now out there.
That's the beauty.
The beauty, but also kind of the
alarm bells start ringing.
Well, it's scary. I have to admit, I was very scared when I released it, just knowing that what was mine is now everyone's, but in a good way, not like in a evil way. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, 100% makes sense. And that said, it's gone out and plenty of people are playing it and everything, and it's pretty greatly received and stuff. And one thing that I noticed when I was playing through it and everything was just like you'd made mention earlier a little bit too, it's just the puzzles throughout the mod and everything. And I always found that like when making a map with especially a mod with a bunch of puzzles, it's really difficult to kind of balance how much information you want to give the player in order for them to solve these puzzles, and you have to do it like subtly in the levels. Do you have any like opinions or like tips for people who are like setting puzzles up on how much information to give them, little ways to like go about it? Because you did pretty good with non-communicated signaling in it, where it made sense, without me having to think too hard about it. Yeah.
Well, I've had both comments saying that some of the puzzles were too difficult for some people, understandably, but also some were very easy. And obviously, each person is going to, or there's the potential for each person to interpret the puzzle differently. And I think the prime example of this can be seen in I think it's the 6th chapter, or I guess it's the 7th chapter if you count the prologue, industrialization, where you have a generator, and you have to push the generator through the double doors with the button switch. And this morning I woke up to a couple of people having problems with that, and they interpreted the puzzle as in you need to go the other way, as in you need to take the plug that's attached to the wire, put it into the double doors, and then switch the doors, and then put the plug into the generator. And I had never once considered that people would think that would be the case.
Yeah.
I'd always thought people are going to go to the other side. They'll meet the zombie on the way down, and they'll get to the puzzle. They'll look at the generator and think, "I need to get that through the door." But no, we had, which is understandable.
Yeah,
and I looked at it and I thought, how did I not see that? So it's one of these things that the puzzle has to be looked at from all angles, from every point of view. And I guess that's where a lot more testing would have come in handy. But yeah, kind of balancing puzzles, the chances of you getting it 100% right as the level designer first time is almost impossible. And that's
feedback.
That's how it is.
Yeah, you need that peer review, as the academia we'll call it. But the play testing, like there's tons of maps I made where I'm just like you just said, where you totally do not even expect the player to do something, and yet they do it, and they'll always find a way somehow. And it's hard to approach your puzzles thinking about it from every single angle like that. You just got to kind of do your best to some extent, and just like cross your fingers and fix the bugs as they come in.
Obviously, on the flip side, you run the risk of it being too easy, and so many times I've been told, oh, it's boring just to put a valve on a wall to turn, to open a door. And well, it's like some people find that tedious, and I understand that. I sometimes find it tedious if you're doing it a lot. So it's about finding that middle ground, that sweet spot where you give the player the opportunity to actually think, not in their subconscious, but in the the forefront of their mind, if you will, and then carry it out in a way that's not insulting, in an easy way, like
a big red arrow pointing at that.
Yeah. Well, some of my puzzles were probably like that, but also not insanely difficult that you have to have 140 IQ to beat it. So, yeah.
Well, I found out that I have about 50 IQ. I was stuck in a level with a padlock on the ceiling, and I had no idea what I was doing. Oh, there was a couple of moments and that's just my own stupid fault. Like, I missed little things.
That one's difficult. I think I was flirting with the idea of putting a wooden post there instead, which I might do for those who are going to play the mod at a later date when I upload an update. But yeah, it's kind of like trying to balance that. Like, how would I make that still a puzzle but not insanely difficult?
Right. I think Chugga, and again, like I said, it was just me kind of being stupid, and I think Chugga Conroy put it best when saying that as soon as you hit the record button, you lose about 40 IQ points. And I can attest to that. I instantly get stupider as soon as I start recording, and I was live streaming, playing through it, so...
Well, yeah, it happens. I often do that where I'll forget about things, or... because I think you're kind of in two minds often.
Yeah, presenting the information as well as playing it, but there's a lot of, in Cosmonaut, there's a lot of these puzzles where you're not quite sure. Like, obviously, you've got to take the plank from the door, and I thought that would be a good indicator for the player to know that they had to be in there, that there'd be something in there to find. But I do find a lot of people saying they don't see the padlock, and, it's... I have no idea. Well, one thing that was clever in that level, particularly if you haven't played Cosmonaut, again, it's down below in the description, but the right above that is a red light, and this is kind of an interesting design element where you lead the player with lighting and everything. And so there's this red light above the vent, so intuitively I know, all right, there's a reason. I know something's up there. I need to get up there. So, in the perfect world, abstractly, I would be led into that room. I would know I still have to get up there. I would probably look up, see the padlock, and knock it. So I totally see the thinking and everything. And I love leading the player with lighting, whether it's, reds and color contrasts or even shadows and everything like that. It's a really subtle game, trying to get a player's attention where you want it to go. And I found it to be pretty challenging in certain instances, just, it's when you place like a random object that a player needs in a map, how do you divert attention to a random object that, in other words, another situation might otherwise just be an ordinary object, but it's required for this puzzle? and you got to somehow get the player to understand that they need that for this, other abstract thing, which, creates this result, which allows the player to progress and everything. And it's pretty tricky sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. I guess one of the hardest things to learn is how much the environment and gameplay mix together. And as you say, something which would be something in the world like a light or I guess a crate or something, how they can be utilized to create a fun experience in the gameplay as well as also being part of the environment. And that's something I think that takes a while to get your head around, especially when I started out. I thought there was the environment and then there was the gameplay, but it's the combination of the two that kind of really, I guess,
it blends together and creates the end product.
The goodness of the map.
Yeah, absolutely. The gameplay is another tricky thing. Like, do you find it's easier for you to organize and design? Of course, different for every situation, but in general, easier to design and set up a puzzle, or easier to design and set up a combat sequence?
Well, I don't know which one's easier, but I definitely love doing the puzzles 100 times better. I find setting up combat situations to be really, really tedious. So, and often what I'll do is I will set up the situation to the situation to a point, and then I will not give it any more attention. And that throughout each version of the mod, the combat situation will stay like that, and it will be kind of not very good. And then I'll eventually have to go and fix it. And I put off doing combat until the later points, and that's often my downfall, because I think adding in combat at the start. So you know how I was talking about designing the puzzles and then doing the area around instead of trying to jam a puzzle into an area you've made.
Yeah.
I think the same can be said for combat. Often I found myself, especially in the earlier levels of Cosmonaut, making an area and then thinking, where can I put these Metro Cops? But, slowly over time, it's kind of, you begin to realize you need to make the combat situation, plan it out very, very well, and then obviously you can build around that. So that's something that I've kind of realized over time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely like doing puzzles much better.
Yeah, I think I would probably agree, just because in a sense, to me it's more of a easy creative outlet, making a unique puzzle, as opposed to, like you said, lining up and scripting a bunch of combine, even though it is kind of art in its own way, setting up a good encounter.
Yeah.
But in regards to what you were saying about setting up a puzzle and then building the environment around it, yeah, I'll usually just block out a map, place the enemies in early, so I can figure out the sort of the flow and where it should rise and fall, I guess, in terms of, action, no action, kind of get that whole lined up, and then I kind of go in and detail it up and bring everything, polish it, and it's really just whatever works best for you, and whoever's listening as well. Everyone has their own method, to the madness, and as long as in the end result you get it, that's what matters.
It is good to change your method, though. Like, I find I've developed as a mapper by developing the way I make the maps. Obviously, that goes without saying. But initially, when I first started out taking level design seriously, I would make the entire layout, and I would not really add in the puzzles or the combat. I just kind of make the layout, and then, as I say, I would jam these puzzles and the combat encounters in after I tried this, the layout. And obviously that kind of yields okay results mostly. But yeah, I'm being very vague, because it is kind of like, well, you do have this level, and it is a good way of completing levels, and that was the method I used to get me to finish things. But then you find that your maps aren't that good, so I changed up, and then it's like, well, I eventually realized that building around these things is the way to go. And who knows, I might change the way I make levels for my next project. I don't know.
Yep, you never know. You always learn something from each experience, dude. You use that and apply it to the next one to get better and everything. So, like when it comes to the key things in development, like the key stages and everything, it's really a balance, just trying to figure it all out. And people are just getting into modding. You never know who's listening. Like, what are some key things about development that you wish more people knew when they're starting out making mods, or even just mod makers in general, like things you've noticed that you wish could be maybe clarified to some extent or done better, or any observations that you've sort of noticed in that regard?
Well, there is a lot of things. Just thinking back, coming from when I started, I guess like 6 or 7 years ago, when I first opened Hammer Editor, where I had this vision that I was going to make Half-Life 3 and it was going to be great, and I had this image of what it was going to be like, and I went in and placed like 4 or 5 brushes, and I was like, yeah, this is a great level, yeah. But I think the most important thing when you're starting out in terms of actual design, so not so much the physical aspect of Hammer, but in actual design, is the way that you play the level is not the way anyone else is going to play the level. No one else will play the mod like you, because obviously you are the designer of it. And I made this map a long time ago called Vengeance at Dusk. It was for Black Mesa Source. And it was a stupid map that I erased from my memory, but I made that, and when I played through it, when I tested it myself, I played through it as if everyone was going to play through it exactly like I would play through it. So when there was puzzles, I never thought, oh, no one's going to try and climb up there, or no one's going to throw a grenade at this. I just played through it each time the same way, and I went, well, that's working, and then I released it, and it didn't do very well. So that's one of the fundamental lessons to be learned, and I learned it the hard way.
Yeah.
And I regret that, but it's all part of the learning experience. So yeah, that's kind of the main thing. And also the other thing I was saying earlier on about making the level as quick as possible. If you're just starting out, it's good to do as much as you can quickly, and obviously releasing that stuff can be a bit dodgy, but just getting through the process of having made a map does so much, because at the start I was of the impression that you had to spend a year to make one level. So I would like start making a room, and I'd spend ages on that one room, and that would be like my pride and joy, that one room. Whereas nowadays it's like each different map is unique and different in its own way, but back then it was like each room. But if you look back at the rooms, they were just blank, bland, boring rooms. So I would have been much better completing projects and getting into that mindset of how the process goes, the coming up with your layout, making the puzzles, designing around them, and iterations. So giving it to someone to play, listening to what they're saying, and then that was also a very hard lesson to learn, and probably one I'm still learning. Listening to others, or actually really listening to what they're saying, as opposed to just listening and being like, yeah, whatever.
It's like you got to manage the expectations when you're starting out like that. Like some people bite off more than they can chew, and some people, they just release really quick, hack job maps to some extent. So like you're saying, is just kind of get into the groove of it. Actually try and make a product, release it. Don't overshoot your target and say, hey, I want to make the next Half-Life 3, like you're saying, and then just get bogged down in production on something like that. Instead, gain experience from releasing things. They might not be perfect, but keep releasing and getting things done, right?
Yeah, and I guess that's where joining a community had really helped me, because prior to, I guess, 2015, I was, I guess, a lone wolf, where I was making all of these kind of rubbish maps for, it was either for Half-Life 2 or CSGO, and no one, there was no community there for me. Well, there was, but I just enjoyed it anyway. And then obviously I found Run, Think, Shoot, Live, and that kind of helped, where I could make a map, and instead of releasing it, I knew people who I could go to and say, try this, and they try it and say, well, you need to change this needs to be done, but I like the way you did this. So I guess being part of a community is very valuable, and I would highly recommend, if anyone listening is not part of a Discord of any kind, obviously there's quite a few that cover Half-Life 2 mapping, I'd consider joining one.
Yeah, with Planet Phillip stopping the mapping competitions and stopping Planet Phillip recently, that was pretty that hurt a little bit, just in terms of, he was such a key figure in holding up the community of Half-Life modding, which is, face it, like almost 15 years old. And it's arguably, earlier than that, when you factor in Gold Source and everything. So for the fact that it's still running strong, and there's people out there in the community in these Discord servers, if you have any interest, feel free to join them. You'll find Dolmo in there. I'll pop my head in and post every now and again. And yeah, there's really great people, dedicated people in those, and having a support structure is super important. You don't want to get too narrow viewed. All you see is just the hallway, like you're saying, like you're just closing in around you. You're just by yourself. It's always good to have feedback and make friends. make connections. You know, you'll make some lifelong friends
yeah.
too. You know, there's people I still talk to from, you know, back in '09 that I used to work on projects with and stuff. So it's really worthwhile. I highly recommend it to everybody. One thing I wanted to bring up, just as sort of a side goof, is I checked out your music, man, on SoundCloud. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh no!
I liked it. I actually liked it.
Yeah.
I freaking liked it. Yeah, I sat down. I was jamming out to the beat. I think the first track's like Bistro. It's like this just really pumpy. It's like Star Wars Cantina, but even better. It's like awesome. I know that's high praise.
It's like Star Wars Cantina on crack. Or sorry, am I allowed to say
after the crack?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, and then there was a couple of good tracks in there, like the piano one and stuff. Like there was a lot of emotional tracks too. I was like, oh, this is actually really good, man. What got you into that?
I like to. Well, I used to do sound engineering, so that was kind of what I wanted to do when I was younger, and I still do a bit of it now. But that was the music's kind of a byproduct of it, where I know how to play instruments, I know how to use a MIDI keyboard, and it's just something I do. And obviously all of the tracks from Cosmonaut were me,
which is awesome.
A lot of them were
I love
a lot of them were kind of looping stuff, because if you listen to like the tracks near the beginning where you're fighting in the canals and stuff, it's just the same thing looped 4 or 5 times, but it's all done to kind of create an atmosphere along with the actual level that I've created. So it's not on its own. So it's I often make the stuff you hear on SoundCloud to be listened to on its own, but with Cosmonaut I'm making it as you're fighting or as you're walking through an environment. So it's a very different ball game doing one for a mod and tracks for just SoundCloud. But
definitely, do you find that like I mean, obviously having that experience is great, because then not only are you a level designer, but you're also able to make some sound effects and make the tracks, and you've leveled up that much more in terms of your value given to a particular project. Do you have any other like primary strengths you consider? Like, are you also a texture artist? Do you do modeling? Is there anything you wish you could do? For me, that's coding. I suck. I hate coding. I really just dislike coding, personally.
I kind of wish I was a good writer, and it's something I've kind of gone on about quite a lot recently, because I've spoken a lot about how the vast majority of the plot for Cosmonaut was cut, and because I am a bad writer, the stuff I did write was pretty awful, to be honest.
Aww.
So I kind of wish I had the skills to take an idea and then interpret it into something that can be presented within a mod or a game, and then have that come to fruition, basically. So I think out of all of the skills that one could have, I think writing's one.
I guess.
Yeah,
I guess it's kind of just like what you're saying, is just you got to keep trying and deciding if this is a craft you want to fine tune or not, and you just got to keep going at it and writing something. And if you keep doing that, eventually you'll get there. Just like with anything, practice makes perfect, right? It just depends on how much time you want to dedicate to each given thing. And now that Cosmonaut's out and you've spent the past solid year working on a behemoth of this awesome project, which I loved, and everyone should be playing it. What's up next in terms of the Dolmo and the Douglas? What's he going to do next?
Well, I don't know. It's kind of a relief, although I've still got a lot to change in Cosmonaut, just to kind of update it based on feedback. It kind of feels like there's a huge weight off my shoulder. It's not in a bad way. Like, it wasn't like Cosmonaut was the worst thing ever, but over time I find that towards the end of the project, obviously I wasn't actually making any levels. I was tweaking small things in the existing levels. So having 7 proper levels, playing through them a couple of times per day, then going in and changing stuff and putting things to stop the props going black if they're in a wall, like the info lighting stuff. That's the most monotonous thing one could possibly do. I'm just like, this is so boring. So I really just want to get back in and do a very quick project. When I say quick, I mean like a few months, a month or so. I wouldn't mind doing a collab project with someone. You know, if anyone's up for it, then that's something I'd be willing to do, because I do enjoy working with others on mods, and you know, it's something that's not done too much. So yeah, that's kind of
right. Just kind of enjoying being done with a mod for now, and then figuring it out as you kind of go forward.
Yeah, I do want to get in and start making new levels again, because obviously it's been a while since I've done that, because you've been busy. But and I know that we're kind of nearing the end here, but I wanted to ask you one more thing that I kind of noticed throughout playing Cosmonaut, which I thought was kind of interesting in terms of design, is that each level was drastically different in terms of the setting and you know, also the gameplay that happened within it. That done, you know, very deliberately, or was that just kind of happy accident of trying to move the player from point A to point B? Because I loved the diversity in terms of the environment throughout each map and level. It was a bit of both, really. I mean, it was kind of the plot I had written initially had all of these locations, which just so happened to be kind of my favorite locations, or locations that I really liked. So in terms of the setup of it, I kind of lead the player through each of, you know, Half-Life 2, then onto episode 1 with the hospital theme, and then onto episode 2 with the mines and the forest, and then White Forest kind of theme at the end. And these are kind of Half-Life themes that I wanted to explore anyway. So, and it just so happened it worked well with kind of, oh, you're in the city and then you go into the hospital, and then you somehow have to get into the, you know, the forest area.
The asylum is my favorite, man. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Of the hunter that drops in on you, and the crazy guy at the beginning and stuff. The track was cool too. Yeah, that was a cool set piece.
There was a lot more to Asylum, obviously, with the proper plot line. So it kind of, to me, it feels like a very condensed, not, you know, lacking map. But I'm glad that, you know, I see that other people are enjoying it, and and the mine cart in the 5th level is probably one of my favorite. If it is my favorite part, especially when you come out the other side into the pond.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool spot.
That's
Yeah,
well,
that must have been tricky
for optimization, allegedly.
Yeah,
but
allegedly.
Yeah, no, I really do like, you know, that bit, and trying to get the player to get back in the minecart so they can come out the other side on the map change took quite a bit of planning.
I bet.
But you know, it's just like, you know, using a logic auto to teleport the player to a location, and then have the cart spawn as well, and then, you know,
that's kind of clever.
Pushed off the cliff. Yeah.
Dang. That's pretty cool. Yeah, just the way you broke it up was awesome. Everything was different. There's always like a little thing happening, like the minecart, or, you know, who knows what, an antlion battle in the mines, as an elevator's coming down, generators charging, you know. Breaking it up like that was just, it was really deliberately done, and I could tell that you were, everything was really well thought out in terms of making this a smooth, fun gaming experience, and that's where I think you kind of shine, is just you got that head for development, dude. You've observed too much. You're too powerful. You know the ways.
I know too much.
Dude. I might have to come over there, and
I'm going into hiding now.
Yeah.
I'm going to. Yeah.
You know too much, my friend. It's really cool though, and like I said, I loved listening to your videos at work. I can tell you're passionate about the subject. You really enjoy finding these little nuggets of information and observing, like, oh, this mapper did this in a cool way, and learning from it is pretty cool, and I really appreciated that about your content, man. So just wanted to put that out there.
You.
Yeah,
that's great. Thank you.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, we talked about some pretty good stuff here. Anything else you want to kind of touch on before we take it dark?
Well, I think there's a lot of things I could talk about, but most of it would be very boring to the common listener. Not in a bad way, not like you common listeners, you know. I mean, like,
you
in
peasants.
the sense of, you know.
You guys are peasants. We all know it. I'll say it for you. I'm just kidding.
Okay, fine. No, in the sense of like the smaller, finer details. I guess I'll do a developer commentary of Cosmonaut where I will really go into depth on exactly what was in each map. And if someone's really interested, they can watch through all of that to get all the fine details of Cosmonaut.
Awesome.
A bit of selfless plugging there.
Nah, no worries. Check his channel out in the description
Check my channel out.
along with that mod link. Again, Dolmo, super awesome to talk to you finally. Hit some good points there. And
Thank you.
yeah, to the viewer, thank you for watching and listening. Hopefully you learned something. And hopefully that coffee is gone that I told you to be drinking at the beginning of the episode. And if you didn't drink coffee, goddamn, rewind it. Play it again, make yourself some coffee, and increase that watch time. We love you guys. Thank you so much, and until next time. Bye.
Bye.